Both fans and newbies are in for something different with Wicked for Good. It's packed with new songs, enhanced story lore, and some surprising action. So who's ready to return to Oz? The final chapter of the untold story of the Witches of Oz begins as Elphaba and Glinda are estranged and living with the consequences of their choices. Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande, Jonathan Bailey, Jeff Goldblum, Michelle Yeoh, Ethan Slater, and Marissa Bode reprise their roles that include singing, dancing, and some wicked drama. Now, if you're a fan of the Broadway stage performance, your ears might have pricked up a bit when I mentioned being in for something different with the second half of the Ozian story. Within the stage production, there's about an hour-ish left after intermission, but this film is just short at 2.5 hours. So to fill that extra time, we get more story depth and character interactions that are completely new. For instance, we get to see the ramifications of the animals within Oz after the wizard has tricked Elphaba into creating his monkey spies, creating more insight into the other population that kind of just disappears within the Broadway production. We're also treated to a bunch of new songs. And while this was an adjustment, especially since I was looking forward to singing along quietly to myself as the movie played, I was completely unfamiliar with these new tunes. So I had to take them in as brand new content. It's kind of like seeing the show for the first time and not being familiar with any of the songs. So it should be something to look forward to, especially because the songs, they're fantastic and performed with melodic beauty. I mean, even Jeff Goldblum and Michelle Yeoh have singing moments. And while they're not to the level of Erivo or Grande, they do give an acceptable singing performance. Something else that surprised me about this part 2 is the amount of action it contains. There's aerial combat, hand-to-hand fighting, and of course, the use of magical spells and powers to overtake opponents. Now, sometimes the aerial footage looked very green screen, almost like a scene from the final Harry Potter film showing Elphaba flying through storm clouds as she outruns pursuing monkeys. And it's not like this looked poor, it just wasn't as smooth and convincing as the flight that we watched in the first Wicked. Thankfully, though, not all of the flying imagery is rough, especially towards the end. As we get to see these darker and more treacherous settings, the visuals become immersive. And since I'm on the topic of generated imagery, the animals we see, they're mainly CGI, of course. A lot of them, though, clearly fake. I probably wouldn't have noticed as much, but the camera spends a good portion focusing on all sorts of animal creatures as they bound about and move to safety. And the extended viewing time allows us to see the flaws in the design and then some of the lifelessness that a few of the animals exhibit. And just like with the flying sequences, this isn't enough to break me out of the narrative or ruin the storytelling. But since we had to wait a year between parts, I did expect a more polished set of computer graphics. But to counteract these shortcomings, some extremely creative and well thought out shots were just mesmerizing. One is an imaginative one-shot that utilizes unique angles and mirror tricks, creating a song-length sequence of phenomenal camera movements that just allow for a hypnotic, fluid motion that kind of confused my brain. It's kind of similar to the opening scene in Contact, where Jenna Malone is bounding up the stairs and then the angle switches in a mirror. For this version, we get something similar to that, but multiplied many times. There's also some added conflict and brawling that I wasn't expecting. It's a blend of silly and chaotic, with a bunch of whimsy thrown in just to keep the characters cute and charismatic. Now, some of the motions and facial expressions that both Grande and Erivo made in the first film, they resurface here, showing that although the duo may not always agree or even have something in common, they still have a deep friendship that transcends any squabble they might get involved in. An extended action scene between the two creates some excitement and then blends in dance-like choreography to make the fighting just more of a frenzied and clumsy ballet. And just like within the first part, the crux of the storytelling relies on the chemistry between Erivo and Grande, which they crush. They build a heartfelt and endearing friendship that's able to alternate seamlessly between snarky, loving, tense, angry, and heartbreaking. They both command the screen when they're on. Oddly, their presences don't compete for prominence when they're sharing a scene. Instead, it combines their graceful allure for something powerful and captivating. That's also the beauty of crafting a stage production into a film. We get to see the nuanced emotion that can pour from a character because the camera can get in really close and the actors then don't have to project so loudly to reach the back of an auditorium. Meaning for this, we see the trembling lips, deeply watery eyes, and expressions of tremendous sadness, as well as then the huge elation an actor gets to exude, displayed with the necessary restraint to make the outpourings intimate and touching. I do think this runs a little too long in the tooth with some of the extra world building we get. It's not as though the pacing grinds to a halt, but because we bounce back and forth between what Glinda is doing in Oz and what Elphaba is doing out in the boonies, there tends to be some choppiness in the progression, creating this ping-pong effect, which is also kind of just a natural result of having the two leads in separate locations. Now, I felt a bit tossed around Oz as we moved from location to location, sometimes in a harried rush, creating a sense of urgency and momentum, but ending up with something really more distracting. And curiously, there are elements surrounding Jonathan Bailey's Fiyero and Ethan Slater's Bach that feel rushed, even though there's so much extra story being created. It's just not extra story that's building on their roles. There are also some thematic elements that are present in the stage production as well as here, but they feel more called out in the movie, creating a social commentary that is relevant for today without feeling like it was explicitly included to do that very thing. I think that through the addition of material, there's now more going on simultaneously than really needs to be. I appreciate the depth as well as the new songs and the creative reprisals, but it also sacrifices some of that cohesive magic that was captured in the first movie, ultimately making me question a bit of the logic and wisdom of breaking the story up into two separate films. Overall, while I'm not as enamored with Wicked for Good as I was with the first installment of the story, this does continue to deliver charming whimsy, captivating performances that continue to surprise and showcase the magic and magnificence of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo as a duo, plus the expanded story creation and additional songs. Unfortunately, the extended lore and runtime create choppy transitions and a less cohesive narrative structure, which is made more noticeable thanks to some not quite awesome visuals towards the beginning of the film and then unbalanced character focuses. But despite these drawbacks, the film still delivers a world of beautiful color, playful banter, imaginative set designs, and a wonderful world that will make you want to revisit the story time and again. There's no sex, nudity, or profanity, but some violence. I give Wicked for Good 4 out of 5 couches. I now want to watch the two films back to back for this extended and immersive experience. Okay, are there any other stage productions that you would like to see adapted into films? Let me know some of your favorites in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me.